Well, I don't usually do this, but this is a quick camera appreciation video, and it's for a Fed 5B that I recently got, and it came in your typical Soviet style terrible case, which I'm going to take off and throw into a box somewhere. But the camera itself is hideous as well, but it does have the 1980 Moscow Summer Olympics commemorative emblem on it. Just screened on, nothing fancy, and the main reason I bought this camera is I started playing around with the former FSU, former Soviet Union lenses, both on my Leica, and getting a few of the Russian cameras working. But for this specific lens, it came with this camera, and the difference in price between buying just the lens and buying a camera is basically negligible, maybe a little bit more shipping. But since it was the special edition, I felt I had to get it. Now these lenses, some people think that they're fantastic. Other people online try to claim that it's just mediocre. It is a Tessar clone, but it's the 61 LD, and the LD means it basically has special coatings, which help especially in color photography, but in black and white I noticed that it gives a huge boost in apparent contrast. So I'm not sure who shot this lens. Maybe they got a bad copy who claims they're mediocre, because I'm finding that they're superb, really can match almost anything, you know, from the 80s on. And these cameras were made from 1975 to 1990. So the 80 Summer Olympics, you know, is right in the middle. Let's see. I guess one of the big downsides of this camera is it has no strap lugs. And for the time that it was produced, you know, strap lugs more or less were considered standard. So older cameras often didn't have strap lugs, and you had to rely on using the case. And I'm never going to use this case. But so the camera came. It was damaged in shipping, but the rangefinder was completely uncoupled, flopped around inside. So I spent a couple hours taking the top off and figuring out that there was a cammed lever that had popped out of its position. So it was a little bit difficult, but in the process I also adjusted the rangefinder both in vertical and horizontal, and my test shot seemed like I nailed the focus pretty perfectly. Now, one lucky thing is this camera, now you have to remove it from the bottom, but the entire back comes off, so you can set it at, you know, the bulb setting and check it with the ground glass for your focus. Some of the earlier Leica clones you couldn't, and including real Leicas, you couldn't do this. So that's nice, and it secures really well, and unlike its contemporary Japanese competition, not that this was any competition, they all relied on, you know, different types of foam to light seal the cameras. This one has no foam to deteriorate or have to replace. But the way I get around the lack of strap lugs is with a wrist strap. I'm finding that I actually prefer that. As long as, you know, I don't have a huge lens on the camera, that's more comfortable. So I got this $5 woven wrist strap, you know, with a pretty nice hardware tripod attachment, and, you know, just, it works. It's comfortable for walking around with, for me. And I guess the other thing is like many of these, the original lens cap was gone. I mean, if the original owner had been using it with the case, it didn't really need a lens cap because, and the lens is pretty pristine. I didn't even wash it. I just blew off a little dust and it's good to go. But since I have a 3D printer and I have a parametric lens cap design that I use, it took a few minutes to measure the lens and make a replacement lens cap. I'm kind of OCD about keeping my lenses protected. Now I see online people take these lenses, since you do get really good results, and they put them on Leicas or other higher end or more vintage cameras than this. But, you know, when you look at the lens, it's pretty freaking ugly, you know. So part of the joy, at least that I find in shooting my Leica or, you know, my more vintage FSU camera bodies like the Fed 2, which is a gorgeous camera, or the Zorky 4, this lens would just ruin the entire look of it. So, but it looks right at home on this ugly dog. And when it comes to handling, you know, it just works. I have no complaints. The one slight complaint I have is, like most of the Fed cameras, they choose to make the viewfinder pretty dark, and I guess the reason they do that is because it makes the focusing dot brighter relative to the viewfinder. I would rather have a little bit dimmer of a focusing dot and then a clearer view, because in available light situations, I would find this hard to focus, but that's not typically how I shoot, especially a rangefinder camera. So outdoors, sunny 16, this just works perfectly. So 1/250th of a second, f11, I'm good to go. Love the camera. My first test roll, pretty much every shot came out impressively sharp, and it has that signature Tessar look, which I personally love. I think I read somewhere that probably most famous photos had been shot with one form of a Tessar lens or another. And so yeah, I think it's a great lens and a combination. You know, when you pair the two together, it handles, it's the lens this camera was made for, so it's a perfect match. So spend $25 thereabouts, get a working copy, and you can't go wrong.